Yo, and welcome back to the LOP show. This is Leadership on Purpose. I'm Blake Bozarth, and guys, some of you in the audience, maybe a minority, are going to hate this episode, and some of you, I think, are going to love it, and there may be some in the middle who might be searching that I hope get a ton of value from it. I know that's a heck of a teaser, but this is Henry Kaestner that we have on today. He is a quintessential entrepreneur, extremely successful as a business leader, and he was one of the co-founders of Bandwidth, which is now a very successful public company. And he has launched a movement really around faith-driven entrepreneurship and faith-driven investing. He's now a co-founder of Sovereign's Capital, which invests in faith-driven entrepreneurs across the globe. And he has so many nuggets in this episode. He talks about the importance of excellence and being excellent in what you do. Pursuing your work with excellence actually is what gives you influence. And so when we talk about growing influence, leading with confidence, but growing influence, it starts with doing very excellent work. And faith is what drives that excellence. Your faith system is actually what can enable and drive excellent work. We start with his why, and he gives it straight, and we share a common faith, and the way that he articulates what he believes and how it drives him is very powerful. How so many people are coasting through life without purpose, without even those of us who might share a Christian faith. So many people are living the quote unquote American dream and aren't really living on purpose, much less leading on purpose. And so it's just a huge shot in the arm, as Chad says in the episode, ready to run through a wall for me as well too, hearing from Henry today. He talks about how you can share why you do what you do and how that actually helps you shape culture and form community. And no matter if you are the owner or the CEO of that company, or if you're a mid-level manager, wherever you are, sharing your story, sharing your why, actually shapes that culture and builds a greater sense of employee belonging and engagement and all the things we really care about as leaders for getting the best out of the people around us and having a place that we all enjoy to work at. Really incredible episode, one of my favorites that we've ever done, and I hope you guys enjoyed as well. If you get value from this episode, be a river, not a reservoir, as we like to say. Share it with somebody else who can also get value from it as well. Without further ado, let's jump into the show. Super pumped today to have Henry Kaestner on the show. Henry, welcome to Leadership on Purpose.
Blake and Chad, it is awesome to be with you guys.
Absolutely, Henry. So glad to have you here today. If you could, just for the audience, give us kind of your career flyover, your story.
So grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, went to school at the University of Delaware, where I discovered my first love, which was that I could make a t-shirt for $5 and sell for $10. Got out of school with like 50 sales teams up and down the East Coast, had a tie-dye boxer short company, sold to Urban Outfitters and stuff like that. But I ended up with copyright problems because of the t-shirts I was selling. My dad said, you can plead naivete when you're 20, but by the time you're 21, you got to get a real job. I watched the movie Wall Street. I wanted to be like Charlie Sheen and worked in Wall Street for 6 years, pursuing all the different things I thought that would fulfill me. And just being a young single guy making a lot of money on Wall Street in the 90s. And then everything changed when I came to faith. I moved to North Carolina at age 28. I had a major faith event where I came to understand that there's a God at the universe who loves me. Had started a financial derivatives company, sold it, started Bandwidth with my best friend and business partner, David Morkin. Through the grace of God, that went well. And 3 or 4 private companies that we spun out of that. We took Bandwidth public, started an investment fund called Sovereign's Capital, which through the grace of God has done great, investing in faith-driven entrepreneurs around the world and funds. We've got real estate funds, public market funds, venture funds, lower to middle market funds. And then we started doing a lot of investing out of our family office in Africa. I love West Africa, and started a ministry called Faith-Driven Entrepreneur, called Faith-Driven Investor. I married to Kimberly, and we had 3 boys. I'm sure that was more than 60 seconds.
Well, you crushed it. And just so the audience knows, that was not put on times 2. You just had that much energy.
I just had that green the time.
Yeah, right. Had to speed up the word count. Absolutely. So, hey, one more just fun question, kind of to get to know you.
Yes.
Henry, I know you're a sports guy. If you could coach any sports team today, you should walk in and you're the head coach. Who would it be, and what would you do? How would you approach it?
I'm going to alienate so many people with this question. All right. So I grew up in Baltimore, a huge Baltimore Orioles fan. So part of me wants to say I'd manage the Baltimore Orioles because I'm not really sure what a baseball manager does anyway. I mean, any type of job where you can sit around and like chew tobacco, it can't be that demanding, right? So I like the low pressure part of that. I'm a huge, my family is really big in lacrosse. I love lacrosse. My father, my grandfather both played for Johns Hopkins. My sons recruited, played for Johns Hopkins. And so that's the sports team I love, but I don't know what I want to coach them. I know it's a lot of pressure because it's a team I care about so much that I think I'd probably mess it up. And so it's either my first choice or my last choice because of that.
I grew up a
Fantastic.
huge Cal Ripken fan, so I can
yes.
appreciate
Dude, I've
the
got all his
the
baseball
Baltimore.
cards. The guy's all his baseball cards sitting 5 feet away from me. I've got all of his. I've got all of Brooks Robinson's. Cal Ripken was the man. Brooks Robinson was the man. Both of them.
I don't have all of them, but I have, I don't know, scores of Cal Ripken, I believe. I just opened them up with my son. He's now 5 years old. He's like, Dad, what are these? He loves them already. I'm like, well, these are going to be yours one day. So here you go.
That's so cool.
So really cool. Hey, we're super pumped to get into the show today with you, Henry. The show is called Leadership on Purpose. We always ask guests towards the end, but we're going to reverse it this time. What is your why? What is it that really drives you?
My why is that I'm grateful for the gift of life that God gave me by loving on me and sending his son to die for me. And I want to be able to live a life in which I know him and enjoy him forever. That's my why. And so everything I do in my life is aligned toward that reality. It's faith system, but for me, it very much is reality. That anything else is just a distraction from that, though I'm distracted a ton. But that's my why. I want to do things out of gratitude for the gift of life given me, endeavoring to know God and participate in the work that he's doing in the world as he's building his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven.
What strikes me just about that is the eternal focus. Henry, God has blessed you with success and entrepreneurship. He's given you an entrepreneurial mind, giftings in that way. Can you connect for the audience how that purpose and that why impacts the way that you approach business and leadership?
I believe I'm a little biased towards entrepreneurs and business owners, but really just leaders in general. I think that we have all been created in the image of a God who works 6 out of 7 days. And the Gospel of John says his work continues to this day. So the why merges with what I do because I work with business leaders as they lean into the opportunities that they have to solve problems and find opportunities and to create and to excel and to take dominion over all things. And I see our call to create and just doing that. And I feel that we have this great opportunity to have work as a purpose. And yet it needs to be done with something that's more than just focus on the manufacture and distribution of widgets. There is a greater purpose in my overall arc about what are we doing here and why has God placed us on earth for such a time as this, is to bring about his kingdom. And so what does that even look like? Well, we get a sense of it in the Garden of Eden. We get a sense of it in Revelation at the end. And there's no mourning, there's no weeping, there's no inefficiency, there's love, there's no darkness. And as business leaders and entrepreneurs and business owners, we play a role towards correcting and redeeming all things. So it obviously blends into my why because of the faith element, and the what and the how are echoes of that, reverberations of that through, okay, what would God get the most pleasure from me if I were to execute and do the following?
That's impactful. And I know for Chad and I and many in our audience, we can totally resonate with that. Maybe not captured as articulately as you did, but that's a powerful why. We were talking about a little bit before the recording, Henry, of how it's a tragedy that you look out into the working world and the world in general, but especially you look at people in the workplace and we see the statistics, we know the data around employee engagement and how many people are just kind of skating through. What are your thoughts there when it comes to purpose? And yes, ours is one that's driven by faith in Jesus Christ and in the God of the Bible. But for those who maybe don't have that same faith, how would you speak to them about leading and living on purpose?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I should never presume that the entire audience shares a Christian faith, and bandwidth and many of the things that I've been involved with, the majority of people I work with don't share the same Christian faith. And yet we all have a faith we've got this ministry now called Faith Driven Entrepreneur, and it's kind of like this title that begs the question, like, what are we driven by? We all have a worldview. We all have a faith in something. We placed our faith in something. And for those of you who are in an audience that don't yet have that faith, it's a great opportunity to investigate it. And of course, we think that there's a great opportunity to just really lean into this message that we believe, that we've taken a leap of faith to take about the way that God loves us. And yet some people might not come up with the same conclusion. I think it would be awesome if it did. But I think the great tragedy is if people don't ask that question. It's just like, what's it all about? Why am I here? And, early in your career, life, I didn't have a faith event until I was 28. So if I'm listening to this program, way back in the time machine at 25, 26, 27, I'm not thinking about the bigger picture thing. I'm thinking about, how do I go ahead and succeed and make more money? At some point in time, that money is going to be able to buy me cool things. And presumably that'll make me happier. I'll probably have a wife and kids. That sounds great too. But there's something deeper that I think is this existential question that all of your audience has an opportunity to think about. It's like, what am I driven by? A faith, and it's a faith in what? And for some, it might be a faith that, like it was for me, that happiness and contentment and purpose will be delivered to me by the accumulation of things and climbing the corporate ladder and having a sexy hot wife. I don't know if you can say that on your podcast or not, but and just being able to have kids and living happily ever after, maybe with a beach house. Beach house would be great. I also like lake houses, so maybe a beach house and a lake house. And what ended up happening for me was that faith system started to unravel at age 28 when I was engaged to this amazingly attractive woman who's amazing, for some reason, really, really loved me. And we started to have those material things. I'm like, I think I need to go ahead and check out a new faith system, because the one I had that I thought would deliver all these things doesn't. But the most important thing, the question that I think is universal, is asking people, what is our faith? What's our belief in? What are we staking? What are we placing our hope on? And then driving from that is, okay, now how does that impact my why? How does that translate into what I do and how I do it, driven by my faith? So it's the same type of extrapolation, if you will, from somebody who comes from a religious faith that maybe somebody can identify with, like Christianity or Judaism or Islam. But some people will have faith in other things. Okay, that's fine. Just go ahead and then work backwards down from there, because you want to be able to sit down and tell somebody your story. And everybody wants to be in community. I think God created us to be in community. So you sit down with somebody and you just like, dude, like, tell me your story. And to everyone understand what makes them tick. Like, what's the bigger thing? I mean, like, dude, you're a kick-ass accountant and you're doing great on this stuff, but like, what's your bigger story? What are the things you really enjoy? Like, where do you come from? What are the things that really get you going? And what are the things that drive you? And we all have an opportunity to share our story, but I think that our story is most powerful when it is undergirded by that why. And I'm so glad to hear that you ask that at the end of every podcast, because as your audience says, what is my why? And then as you have this opportunity to share that with others, you may win people over to your worldview in not a prescriptive or presumptuous way. It's just by talking about, these are the things that really get me going. And for somebody, it might be, I get really excited about vacation or doing whatever. C.S. Lewis once said that what makes a friendship, and that's what I think we're all wired to, is finding another person that's like, wow, I thought I was the only person with this, or being able to bond together over that shared sense of purpose or why, or even if you don't know the answers, it's just, I'm exploring and trying to find that out. We love fellow travelers. I'll stop there.
There's just so much goodness there. One of the things that I was thinking about was how you were pursuing these material things, and you kind of just got to this point where I need to reevaluate this. It made me think of an interview with Tom Brady, and I think it was after he won his third or fourth Super Bowl, and he's kind of asking that same question. It's like, there's got to be a little bit more than this. There's got to be more than this. Something that he's reached the pinnacle of the sport. He's arguably the best ever, and he's even asking, there's got to be more. And one of the things I'm struck by, just as I look at the world today, is I think there's so many people that are craving a deeper purpose, but they don't know how to put their finger on what that should be. I think you look at talent today they want to go to companies. They don't just want to go to a company where they can have a job and make money. They want to go to a company where they feel connected to something deeper. So, putting the Christian worldview on, that's, to me, is a prime opportunity that people are looking for more and saying, I'm in pain. There has to be more. And I think about our role as leaders And I guess flipping it back around, my question for you is on setting culture, setting up a culture where people can be
Yeah.
known and their stories can be shared and there can be connections. But how do you do that? How do you set a culture in an organization as maybe a mid-level manager, right? Maybe you're not the business owner, maybe you're not the leader, but how can people set up a culture where folks can feel connected to something deeper, regardless of what their worldview is?
So in some ways, it's a lot easier to do as an entrepreneur or as a CEO, because that had been my posting. And because we have a ministry that works with entrepreneurs and business owners, I'm most conversant. I think a lot of that also applies to anybody, that a workplace culture, even if you just got a small team, starts with your ability to talk about why you do what you do. And you want to make sure that what you have is a culture, and you want to have in your, say, your accounting team or your sales team, you want to make sure that it's not at odds with the corporate culture. And yet most corporate cultures will provide some really great opportunity for you to be able to say, here's what we're about. So at Bandwidth, we started off our culture or values were faith first, then family, then work, then fitness. Those are the things that undergirded who we were and why we did what we did. And we just want to have this values that would embody and mirror the things that David and I wanted to see in our own personal life, believing that our corporate culture could only stand the test of time if it had integrity with what we wanted. And we thought faith was the most important thing, but we wanted to be 9 kids between us. We want to be there for all the sports teams and games. And we want to take our wives on date night and things like that. So we indoctrinated those into our culture. Now, within Bandwidth, Joe Campbell ran operations. They had a culture. They had a separate culture. Part of that started with Joe's story. Part of that started with the fact that Joe really liked taking the team out for drinks like every other Friday, and they get together and they'd have shots of tequila to start things off. And it wasn't an alcoholism culture. They didn't go ahead and get drunk. It was just the thing they did. Sales team didn't do that. Other people didn't do that. But it was one of these things that kind of built experiences. They'd go on mountain bike stuff. Well, is mountain biking part? Well, yeah, fitness is part of the Bandwidth culture, but there is a subculture in operations. And Joe Campbell did such a great job of solidifying that. And you can do that. And he did it by telling his story. And for people to know who he was, who his wife was, his family, his kids, and then him really caring about their story, their spouse, their children, the things that they cared about. So, as I talked about out loud with you guys, the aspects of culture that work for an entrepreneur or business owner to execute on are the same ones that work for somebody who might even just have a sales team with 3 guys.
That's a great nugget there. Just the simplicity of why you do what you do and being willing to tell your story, like inviting others into that creates culture. You talked about creating community too, Henry. That's what we want in a workplace. We want to feel, maybe an overused term these days, but we want to feel that sense of belonging. And when you're somebody who's like leading with your why and you're real about it, and it's something that obviously your why is more than just about you and maybe material things, right? It's rooted in something that people can be like, oh, that's inspiring. I'm not just impressed by this person, I'm inspired by this person, and I want to be more like that. That's a great way to help shape a culture. I know you have some thoughts on this. Whole show is about helping people grow their influence, lead with confidence and humility. I know you have some thoughts about the role that excellence, being excellent at what you do, the role that plays actually in having and growing influence. Can you share a little bit about that, Henry?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were riffing about this a little bit before we went on air, and some of the things that get me fired up. There's a Swiss American theologian, guy named Francis Schaeffer, who once said, it's to the degree that we do our work well, that we have an opportunity to witness and be heard. And I think that's really simple and really important. And I think that is all too oftentimes lost by folks that are driven by a religious faith, who tend to think that, gosh, my business and what I do in work is important, but it just, pays the bills, because my real work is something that's outside. And, if I volunteer at Young Life at 5:00, I can go home, and that's really where the real work happens. And I think that when somebody driven by their faith, any faith, but let's just say camp out on Christian faith for a little bit. If you're driven by your Christian faith and you do any type of work that's less than excellent, I think it mourns and grieves God. And I think it makes that you have as much of an opportunity to share the reason for the hope you have with gentleness and respect as you did your job. If you do that with excellence, and everybody wants to know what makes you tick, and they're going to be more interested in understanding your story. They're going to be more interested in wanting to work with you. But there needs to be an integrity between your faith system and the work that you do, or you're in the wrong job. Now, one of the great misunderstandings of the Christian faith is that work is dirty. And, the real important thing in hierarchy is to be a pastor or missionary. And then the work, pays the bills and to help financially support pastors and missionaries. And so that's why it's important. And so people have this demeaned view of work that I don't think is biblical. And I think that it compromises where they are and their opportunity to really feel like they're communing with God and in sync with him. And I think that it absolutely compromises their ability to be an influential leader, and definitely their ability to share their faith system. And, this kind of crystallized a little bit. We're talking about things that have happened in our lives recently. I mentioned the fact I went to Oppenheimer, right? So you guys haven't seen it yet. You need to see it. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan. His work is amazing. And if people are listening to this and they don't like Christopher Nolan, they probably are like, okay, I'm not going to do anything that Henry says. But if you resonate with this, Oppenheimer was so amazing. It was a tremendous film. The things I took away from it are probably all that Christopher Nolan intended me to do, and maybe some other ones as well. It gave a great overview of history and so many other things. But the inescapable conclusion is, I watched it with my 3 boys, is, look, watch what happened. There are people in life that lean into the fact that they have been created for such a time as this. And for good or bad, and people can be on either side of the Oppenheimer debate. I think Nolan did such a great job of fairly presenting it. He made an impact on the world, as did Einstein, and as did several of the other characters in the show. But it also shows in some of the scenes with some larger audiences, just a bunch of lemmings, people that were just swayed and moved by just kind of like the cultural zeitgeist at the time, without actually really thinking about what are the ramifications of these different things that are going on, and saying, I'm going to step in and I'm going to take some chances. Because if you're motivated by your Christian faith, what's the worst thing that can happen to you? You get killed. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. You have an orthodox doctrine of Christian faith. That's not the end. It's not the worst thing. The worst thing that can happen is just kind of cruising to your funeral. And I look around me in life and I just see so many people doing that. They're cruising to their funeral. They're out lean into, like, you know what? Life is more than just the American dream. So here's one of the things I think we went wrong after World War II is pursuing the American dream. It's like, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to have home ownership. Home ownership is awesome. It's one of the greatest ways to build wealth, to be clear. But when the American dream is, I want to go ahead and have a house in suburbia with a white picket fence and kids, and I want to retire at 65, and then I get a chance to play golf or go down to the beach. When that becomes the American dream, Satan just celebrates. It's just like, great. I've now taken an entire belief system out of the world, and I have made them so that they're just completely like inert. And I think that there's an opportunity that we all have as we're just leading on a purpose, is to understand, what is that purpose? And it's a big deal. In the scope of eternity, why would a God place us on earth, or whatever your faith system dictates? Why in the world are you here? It's got to be for something big. And it's the big thing is, if you're a Christian, is that God's kingdom is advancing, and there's a real battle going on. And yeah, part of that battle is like on the Ukraine-Russia type of war. And you don't have to, by the way, you don't have to have this type of podcast and shake people by the helmets a little bit in the Ukraine. They realize it's a battle. We're in a battle for our lives. This is important. And their battle that they're thinking worth dying for is defending the homeland. And Russia, I'm not 100% sure about all their motivations, but there are a lot of young people going out there and dying, and they're leading with a purpose, and they've got a purpose. That purpose might be right, it might be wrong. The challenge with too many people, I think, in America is we don't have that. We don't have that thing worth dying for. And just what we're really trying to do is we're trying to inoculate ourselves against any type of real discomfort. And because that's going to mess with really what I'm trying to do. It's risk aversion. It's, seeking towards comfort. And I think that's the greatest threat to American society and to our ability to lead with a purpose. It's going to compromise our abilities. We have to have something greater, deeper, believe that God has put us on this earth for a reason. We're going to find it, and we're going to execute on it with excellence and with purpose.
There's just so much there that I want us to hold on to. What it just makes me think about is this idea of salt and light. You want to be salty. You want to be that person that just does life differently. The one who's like, I'm not in this to retire at 65. I'm not in this to cruise towards mediocrity. I'm in this to make an impact and hold on to that. I don't think we can go through the ups and downs of life and just kind of the blows that we're going to take without being connected to that deeper purpose, like you talked about. And I just think about, I'm going to go into sports for a second. I think about just excellence being your platform when you are at the top of your game. I think about athletes. So many athletes have a platform because of their excellence to share. But even more than that, I think some of the most impactful ones are when things don't go right for an athlete, when they lose. That's when people really listen. There's a guy I think of, Kyle Snyder. He's a wrestler, youngest Olympic gold medalist in American history. He's won a couple of gold medals, multiple-time world champ, got pinned in the world finals a few years ago. And he got interviewed and everyone's like, oh my gosh, like, how's he going to respond? And he just kind of gets up and, he goes to the interview panel and they're like, Kyle, how you feeling? He's like, it doesn't define me.
Yeah.
He's like, my faith defines me. I do this not to win. I do this to be excellent. And I think that's what a leader needs to do in an organization, independent of your faith or your worldview, but you want to be that person that people are drawn to, that salt that has flavor.
The risk, though, of focusing on excellence is that people focus on excellence as the number one. If you focus on excellence, it'll go poof. If you focus on your faith system and why you do what you do, then excellence is possible. I think about, I'm a lousy golfer. I like golf. I'm a lousy golfer, but I am fascinated by so many of the leading golfers in the world because you've got to be on with your physical game and your mental game, right? And so many of the world's top golfers that have to be able to combine both of those. It's not about excellence on the golf course. That's they're number one, just like the guy on the wrestling mat. And that's the secret. You'd think you want to be the greatest PGA golfer of all time. Focus on it 20 hours a day. Eat, sleep, drink, golf. Don't have any other distractions. That'll give you an advantage. Kobe Bryant had, and there's something to that, to be clear. Practice is important. Practicing craft. Well, endeavoring to be excellent. But if you get it out of order with your faith system, you can't attain it. And it's this kind of countercultural, counterintuitive type of concept. And that wrestler got it. It was because all along, he was excellent on the wrestling mat all along. I'd suggest to you, because he had that higher power that allowed him to be able to say, why am I doing what I'm doing? And my goodness, when I wrestle, I feel God's pleasure and I'm communing with him. And that's the most important thing for me. It's not like when I wrestle, I've got 20,000 screaming, adoring fans. If there's a Chariots, I mentioned before the movie Wall Street with Charlie Sheen, another 1980s movie is this Chariots of Fire, won the Oscar. And in this, they've got this great runner. And he talks about the fact that when he runs, he feels God's pleasure, not that he's working for the adulation of 40,000 screaming fans. He's working for the fact that I feel God's pleasure. So when this guy over there is wrestling and he's wrestling as hard as he can, he's playing for an audience of one. And by the way, you do that, that actually allows you to be really, really successful in golf or wrestling or business.
So 50 plus episodes in to LOP. I don't know that we've had a more fitting episode for what this show is titled, about leading on purpose. Henry, this has been phenomenal. There's so much more we could cover. We got to let you go, I know. So we're going to get you out on this question. BHAG, Big Hairy Audacious Goal. What is there anything right now that you're going after when you think about living on purpose, leading on purpose, being faith driven? What is there anything right now that you're targeting?
Yeah. I know that this podcast has become more theological than maybe you guys had intended, but to be clear, my big selfish ambition is just to be able to know God and just to enjoy him by doing what I do. Subordinate to that is maybe more universally applicable, maybe more specific, is that I'm all kinds of geeked out now about Africa. The entrepreneurial dynamism in that continent is unbelievable. Average age is 20. You've got political stability for the first time in a long time writ large. There are clearly some exceptions. But you've got the ability to just leapfrog over current technologies. There's some of the leaders in the fintech world are there. And these are people, men and women, that are driven by understanding enough about the way things work in the West and saying, this is the way things need to be in Africa. Average age of 20, producers, consumers, not having to be held back by all these, having to, have a system, a taxation system that has, support all these pensioners. So the demographics they have, and it's this culture. It's this beautiful, wonderful thing. And so I was in West Africa in June. I'll be back in September. I'll be back again in February. And the entrepreneurial dynamism is amazing. So the BHAG is What does it look like to come across and to equip and empower, activate, encourage faith-driven entrepreneurs all throughout the African continent? And that's a big, I mean, that's, I don't know, there are millions of them, right? I mean, there's maybe, there are tens and hundreds of millions of them. So I'll never be able to do it all by myself or with our team, with our organization, or maybe even with 10, but with God, all things are possible. And that's the thing what I go for, is that there's something beautiful about what is going on in Africa. And there's some, going to Nigeria is it's a crazy place. There's some inefficiencies there that'll just, fluster you. And yet just the passion of these people is just awesome. So that's the BA.
Incredible. People want to hear more from you. Henry, where's the best place to look you up?
Thanks for asking. I'm on LinkedIn. faithdrivenentrepreneur.org and faithdriveninvestor.org are the two ministries we run. And we've got a blog and a podcasting groups and conferences and things like that. But yeah, that's the answer. Thanks for asking.
Thanks so much for being a part of the show. It's been an honor, and we can't wait to get this out and impact our audience. If you enjoyed this episode, the best thing you can do is be a river, not a reservoir. Who could you share this with that could also get value from it as well? Until next time, keep leading on purpose. Peace.